Right, so get this, you guys. We've got some seriously intense material to go over in this deep
Oh,
dives.
yeah.
We're talking Mexican drug cartels, but not just like the headlines. We're going deeper.
Yeah.
We're going into the world to the eyes of the people who are actually in it.
Wow.
Informants, hitmen. We're talking the raw, unfiltered truth from the inside.
You got it.
We've got a bunch of sources this time. It's really incredible.
It is.
We've got a YouTube interview with Dr. Hal Bradley,
Okay.
former underboss for the Kaloa cartel turned DEA and CIA informant.
Wow.
Also an ABC News piece on Martin Corona, a cartel hitman who also became an informant.
Right.
And we also can't forget Sebastian, a confidential informant working to rescue trafficked women and children.
Right.
And Jose, another former hitman.
Yeah.
So the range of perspectives here is incredible.
Yeah, it really lets us see all sides of this world.
Yeah, for sure. And it really, I think, maps out the evolution of this dark world through decades of firsthand experience. So first up, we're going to dive into Dr. Bradley's story. And honestly, some of this stuff sounds like it's straight out of a movie.
Oh, I know it.
So picture this 1969. He's sent to this tiny Mexican village as a teenager.
Huh.
And he ends up right in the middle of a heroin operation.
Wow.
He even forms bonds with future cartel bosses.
Ugh.
It's crazy.
That's wild.
It is. And what I think is so striking about this is that Bradley's early exposure to this world really shaped his view of the cartel.
Right.
It wasn't just some faceless criminal organization to him.
Yeah.
It was this complex social structure with its own twisted code of honor and loyalty.
A whole other society, really.
Yeah, almost like a society within a society. And he actually met Ramon Arellano Felix,
Oh, wow.
who went on to lead the Tijuana cartel.
Yeah.
When they were both just kids, they were riding burros through poppy fields, totally unaware that they were in the heart of heroin production.
That's incredible.
I know, it's mind-blowing, the kind of deep-rooted history we're talking about here.
Yeah, for sure.
And it shows just how normalized this world was for some.
Totally.
Bradley witnessed an execution just 3 months into his stay in this village
Oh, my gosh.
and was told to never speak of it.
Yeah.
Which I think really tells you a lot about the environment he was immersed in.
Yeah, like from day one, that's just the reality.
It's heavy stuff, and that's a detail that stuck with me too.
Yeah. Yeah.
The desensitization to violence at such a young age.
Right.
It's really hard to comprehend.
It is.
And then there's the constant pull of ambition and easy money.
Of course.
Bradley starts smuggling marijuana in college, lured in by those quick profits.
Sure.
But then in the late 70s, everything changes when cocaine enters the picture.
Ah.
And that's a major turning point, not just for Bradley, but for the entire cartel landscape. Cocaine brought in this level of wealth and power.
Yeah.
That just amplified everything.
Take it to a whole other level.
Exactly. By this point, Bradley's living this double life. Successful businessman by day, major cocaine traffickers by night,
Wow.
distributing hundreds of kilos across the Pacific Northwest.
Crazy.
He even had this high-ranking police officer on his payroll
Oh, wow.
to keep him one step ahead of the DEA.
So he was playing both sides.
Totally. And it makes you wonder, was there ever really a way out for someone like Bradley?
I mean, how could you?
I don't know. He tried to leave the cartel,
Yeah.
but they literally delivered this massive cocaine shipment to his doorstep,
Wow.
making it clear that walking away wasn't an option.
Not a chance.
And that's the thing about the cartel. It's not
Yeah.
just about the money or the violence.
Right.
It's this feeling of being trapped, of never being truly free.
It's like a web.
It is.
That's-
And that leads us to a dark chapter in Bradley's story
Okay.
and the evolution of the cartels as a whole.
All right, let's get into it.
We've talked about the allure of the cartel, like why someone would be drawn into that world.
Yeah.
But what's really disturbing is how the cartels shifted towards this, extreme violence.
Oh, yeah.
Both Bradley and Corona, the hitman we were talking about from that ABC News piece, they talk about this change. It wasn't always this brutal, was it?
Right. No, there was a definite turning point, and it's fascinating how both of them point to the influence of Pablo Escobar
Okay.
as the catalyst.
Interesting.
They actually call it the Medellin University.
The Medellin University. What is that?
So essentially it was Escobar's methodology. He
Oh.
was all about brutality, and he really taught the Mexican cartels how to use torture and terror as a way to control and intimidate people.
Wow.
They basically adopted and amplified those tactics, and this is where we really start to see the emergence of that horrific level of brutality that we now associate with the cartels.
So Escobar was like the professor of evil.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, you could say that.
It's crazy, but I mean, why was this so effective? Like, why did this approach work?
Well, think about it. Violence creates a culture of fear, right? It eliminates rivals, it silences anyone who opposes you, and it keeps everyone else in line.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a gruesome way to do business, but it's effective if you're trying to consolidate power.
I see your point.
And there's this chilling example from Bradley's story
Yeah.
about an incident that happened at a ranch.
Okay.
He and his business partner went there expecting a meeting about cocaine, but instead,
What happened?
they were forced to watch as 3 Rottweilers were set on this man who was like bound and gagged.
Oh my God.
And the reason this guy was targeted was because he was showing off his wealth.
Really?
Yeah, new cars, gold chains, things that attracted unwanted attention.
Oh, so it was like a warning.
Exactly. It was a brutal message to anyone who dared to, like, step out of line.
That's insane. And just the level of fear that must have instilled in people.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, you can really see how these tactics shifted the whole power dynamic within the cartel.
Right, because if you weren't afraid of the police, you were definitely afraid of the cartel.
For sure. And then we have Corona's account, which totally reinforces this shift towards brutality.
Yeah.
He details a hit he carried out on a pregnant woman.
Wow.
And her sister, who were suspected of talking to the police.
It's just awful.
It is. And then he goes on to describe the murder of the woman's father a month later.
Oh, my gosh.
I mean, these weren't just isolated incidents. This
Yeah.
was like their standard operating procedure.
Yeah.
You know?
It was about control.
Yeah, it was about sending a message
Right.
and hearing all this firsthand from someone who actually carried out these acts.
Yeah.
It's just this stark reminder of the dehumanization that's just like baked into this world.
Right. It becomes normal.
You know, it's not just about the victims either. It's about what it does to the people who actually commit these acts too.
It changes them.
It does. And Jose, the former hitman, interviewed by LED Bible,
Yeah.
he actually talks about how new recruits were essentially seen as cattle for the slaughter.
Ugh, that's so disturbing.
It is. And this casual acceptance of violence,
Right.
it's just incredibly disturbing. And it highlights just how pervasive it was within the whole cartel structure.
Right. It was just part of the job.
So this is heavy stuff to think about.
It is.
But it's this descent into brutality that ultimately leads both Bradley and Corona to become informants.
Right. They had to get out.
They did, but their paths to cooperation were very different.
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
So in 1993, Bradley actually just walks into the U.S. Attorney's
He
office.
just walks in.
He does, and offers up the cartel's entire network
Wow.
in exchange for leniency. And he was still deeply embedded in the cartel at this point.
So risky.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Corona, on the other hand, is caught after fleeing to the U.S.
Okay.
And then he chooses cooperation over a possible life sentence.
Right. So it was more of a necessity for him.
Exactly, but they were both taking a huge risk turning against this powerful and dangerous enemy.
For sure.
They were putting their own lives and the lives of their families on the line.
Absolutely.
So what did they have to offer that was so valuable to the authorities?
Well, their access was invaluable. You know,
Sure.
Bradley, as an underboss, he understood the inner workings of the cartel,
Right.
and he could identify key targets.
He had all the intel.
And Corona, as a hitman, had firsthand knowledge of the cartel's most brutal acts.
So he could testify to their ruthlessness.
Exactly. They had both seen the darkest corners of this world.
But even becoming an informant doesn't guarantee safety, right?
Unfortunately not.
Bradley was later kidnapped and tortured in Mexico
Oh, wow.
when his cover was blown.
That's terrifying.
It is. And Corona continued to be targeted even after retiring from his life as a hitman.
Jeez. So they were never really free.
It's like they were always looking over their shoulder.
Right. And their stories raise some really difficult questions about the war on drugs.
Like what?
Well, is it ever ethical to work with former criminals?
Yeah.
Even those who have committed horrific acts?
That's a tough one.
It is. And to what extent can someone truly escape this life once they've been a part of it?
Right. Like, can you ever really get out?
It makes you wonder.
There are definitely no easy answers here.
No, not at all.
But one thing's for sure, the cartel is constantly evolving. It's not static.
Yeah.
And by the 2000s, we see them embracing even more gruesome violence and expanding into new criminal enterprises.
That's right.
So we've been talking about this evolution of violence within the cartels,
Yeah.
and it feels like they're constantly finding new ways to adapt,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
and expand their operations.
Right.
It's scary to think about.
It is.
And I think the fentanyl crisis is a perfect example of this.
Absolutely right.
Even Bradley, who was like so deeply entrenched in the drug trade,
Yeah.
He mentions, like, backing away from working in trap houses
Oh, wow.
because of the dangers associated with fentanyl.
Yeah, it's so potent.
It is. It's just so much more addictive
Right.
than anything they were dealing with before.
Uh-huh.
And it highlights this shift towards, these more potent, more addictive substances.
It's a game changer.
And it's not just about the drugs themselves.
Yeah.
It's about the impact they have on communities all across the U.S.
Yeah.
Fentanyl's ravaging lives.
The plague.
And the cartels are profiting from this devastation.
Sadly.
Yeah. It's a chilling reminder that the cartel's reach extends far beyond Mexico's borders.
Oh, for sure.
Their influence is felt in our cities, our neighborhoods, our families.
Absolutely.
And it's not even limited to drugs.
Right.
Let's look at Sebastian's work rescuing trafficked women and children.
Yeah.
I mean, this exposes a whole other horrifying aspect of the cartel's activities.
That it does.
It's just heartbreaking to hear how these women and children are lured with these false promises of a better life,
Right.
only to end up trapped in this nightmare of exploitation and abuse.
Modern day slavery.
It is, and it's just a sophisticated network that operates across borders,
Mm-hmm.
often preying on the most vulnerable members of society.
The people who need help the most.
Exactly. And Sebastian talks about how the cartels will use threats against families back home
Oh, gosh.
to ensure compliance.
It's just awful.
The level of cruelty is hard to even fathom.
I know. It's just unimaginable.
It makes you wonder, how do you even begin to dismantle something like that?
Right.
It's not just about stopping the flow of drugs anymore.
No, it's so much more than that.
We're talking about rescuing people, providing support,
Right.
and addressing those root causes that make them susceptible to these predators in the first place.
It's a huge task.
It is a huge task, and Jose's account sheds light on another disturbing trend within some cartels.
Okay. What's that?
He mentions that they're paying their members in drugs,
Oh, wow.
particularly methamphetamines.
So they're getting their workers hooked, too.
It's a way to create dependency,
Right.
ensuring loyalty through addiction.
So they're not just profiting from addiction, they're actively creating it.
Exactly. It's this vicious cycle.
Yeah, it's a trap.
And we can't forget about the role of technology and social media and all of that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean, the cartels are using these tools for recruitment propaganda, even intimidation. They're adapting to the digital age,
They're getting more sophisticated.
becoming more elusive and honestly more dangerous.
It's a new kind of warfare.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it's clear that the fight against these criminal organizations is far from over.
No, it's not.
And these stories really highlight the complex, constantly evolving nature of the threat.
Right, it's always changing.
It's not just about stopping the flow of drugs. It's about addressing the root causes,
Yeah.
supporting the victims, and just recognizing that this problem has so many layers.
It's a multifaceted problem.
Exactly. And you've hit the nail on the head.
Thanks.
The cartel isn't this faceless entity. It's
Right.
made up of individuals
Real people.
with their own motivations, their own ambitions,
Yeah,
and often their own moral struggles too.
absolutely.
And understanding those individual stories, as disturbing as they can be,
Uh-huh.
is crucial to effectively combating this threat.
I agree 100%.
What really struck me throughout this deep dive was just the human cost.
Yeah.
We hear about cartel violence in the news all the time,
Right.
but these firsthand accounts, they
Yeah.
bring it home in such a visceral way.
It makes it real.
I agree. And the moral compromises the descent into brutality, but also the glimmers of hope for redemption.
It's a mixed bag.
It is. It really is. And it reminds us that the cartel isn't just some abstract criminal organization.
Yeah.
It's made up of people, and their actions have real devastating consequences.
Right.
This has been a heavy, deep dive,
It has.
but incredibly insightful.
I think so, too.
We've only scratched the surface.
Yeah.
But these stories give us this powerful glimpse into the dark underbelly of the cartel world
For sure.
and just the complexities of fighting this ongoing war.
It's a war with no end in sight.
And as we wrap up, I keep thinking about all those who are still trapped in this cycle of violence and exploitation.
It's tough.
It is. And how do we break that cycle and offer them a path out?
That's the question, isn't it?
It is. It's a question that deserves our attention.
Our attention and our action.
Exactly. This is something we need to be talking about.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, this has been a lot to process.
It has.
But I think knowledge is power. And the more we understand about how these organizations work, the better equipped we are to confront the challenges they present.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So we encourage you to continue exploring this topic, seek out information, engage in meaningful conversations.
Right.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.
Great advice. Thanks for joining us.